Hello everyone, I am today's storyteller. If you are listening to this story, you are probably looking for a way to relax, to forget the worries in life. Before we begin, make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel. Please leave a message telling me where you are from and when you are watching this video. And now, I want you to sit comfortably. Let all your anxious and stressful thoughts disappear, and prepare yourself for a journey into an unusual place, an alley where strange sounds may call your name, even if you don't know the reason. I vividly remember the first time I passed through that alley at night. It was after a long shift, my body was tired and stressed. My back ached from sitting for hours in front of the computer screen, my eyes felt heavy from the light from the screen, and I just wanted to go home as soon as possible. That alley looks very harmless during the day. Just a narrow road between two brick walls, with a few trash cans on the side of the road. But at night, it has a different feeling, a feeling that I can't explain. That night, I walked into the alley as usual. The dim streetlights barely illuminated the path, and the cold night air enveloped me. But when I entered, I suddenly heard a strange sound. A very soft whisper, almost inaudible, but clearly calling my name. I stopped, trying to determine the source of the sound, but there was only darkness and silence. I took out my phone, turned on the flashlight and shined it into the alley, but there was nothing. That feeling, the feeling of my skin rising in waves of chills, I can't explain. It must be the wind, I said to myself, or maybe a cat. But no matter how hard I tried to convince myself, that feeling of insecurity still wouldn't leave me. The next day, I walked that alley again during the day. Everything is normal, nothing strange. Last night's strange feeling might just be an imagination, I think. But then when I walked through the alley at night for the second time, what happened I couldn't explain anymore. This time, that sound rang out again. But this time it was clearer, almost like a deep voice calling my name. I stopped, looked around, but there was no one. A feeling of fear began to overwhelm me. My reason tried to find an explanation, but my fear grew stronger and stronger. I continued walking, but my steps sounded like echoes from the cold walls. That feeling is unforgettable, the feeling like someone is watching me. All that week, I tried to ignore the alley, but it was too convenient to ignore. It's the fastest shortcut home. However, every time I passed by, I heard that whispering voice, calling my name. Every night, I felt nervous when I walked into the alley, and I began to wonder if someone was watching me. One night, I decided to record everything. I don't have professional recording equipment, just a phone. But I want proof to prove that I'm not crazy. I turned on the camera, about to enter the alley, and I heard that whisper again. I held my phone in my hand, trying to focus on what was happening. The surrounding sound seemed to become more and more vague, the sound of cars in the distance, the rustling of a plastic bag on the ground. And then, that voice rang out, clearer than ever. My name, that was the sound I heard. I turned around, the flashlight illuminated the alley, but there was no one. I stopped, my heart beating faster than ever. I tried to stay calm, but my body couldn't stop shaking. And then, something strange happened. Despite the overwhelming feeling of fear, I still tried to continue walking into the alley. I turned around and continued holding the phone, the dim light of the flashlight still shining on the brick walls. Again, that whisper rang out, this time right behind me. I turned around immediately, the flashlight light was flashing, but still no one. Some shadow, or maybe the reflection of light in this cramped space, made it impossible for me to distinguish clearly. I felt an invisible tension surrounding me. I continued walking a few more steps, each step heavier, my sound echoing in the quiet space. But then, I heard that sound again, a soft whisper, as if someone was standing right next to me, even though I couldn't see anyone. This time, the sound was even clearer, making it impossible for me to ignore it. Who is calling my name? Am I haunted by hallucinations of fatigue after a long day at work? Or is there really someone playing a joke on me in this alley? I started asking myself unanswered questions. Suddenly, I felt a cold breeze running down my spine, as if something was lurking in the darkness. I turned around, but there was no one. There are only dark alleys, old brick walls and a few trash cans lying on the ground. There was no movement, no sign of a person or object. Still, that feeling didn't go away. For a moment, I could feel the presence of something beyond my sight. A feeling that I cannot explain. And then I noticed something strange. The flashlight's light was reflecting off the walls, but I could see a figure, a vague shape, like a shadow moving from corner to corner. I stared at it, but in just a moment, the figure disappeared. I didn't dare breathe loudly, didn't dare look more closely. I felt my heart pounding, not because of the fear of a normal person, but because I felt something was following me, staring at me from the darkness. I walked faster, but my footsteps still echoed throughout the alley, and the whispering sound continued, this time, clearer than ever. My name. I cannot escape this obsession. A week passed, and every night I faced that alley again. I cannot avoid it. Although I really wanted to take a detour, the alley was the quickest shortcut home. Every night, I try to stay calm, walking past there as a habit, even though I know that I will hear that whisper again, that voice calling my name. Even though I try to ignore it, every time I passed that alley it felt like a joke that I couldn't stop. There are nights when I wake up feeling anxious, my heart is racing, my body can't stop shaking. And then, one night, I decided to come back again, this time with a clear purpose. I wanted to find out the truth. I took out my phone and turned on recording mode. This time, I will not only listen but also record everything. I hope that this will help me find the cause of these strange sounds. As I entered the alley, the strange feeling came back. The walls around me seemed to enclose me, and I felt like I was entering a maze of darkness, where everything was obscure and inexplicable. I still hear my footsteps echoing in the quiet space. And then, like a habit, that whispering sound rang out again. My name. This time, the voice was so clear that I couldn't mistake it. I stopped, turned around, and looked around. But this time, I saw something very different. On the opposite wall, I saw a very strange graffiti. It looked like a face, but it wasn't the face of a person. The figure's eyes stared at me, even though I knew there couldn't be anyone here. I felt my breathing quicken, my throat dry, and I felt fear spread throughout my body. I tried to keep recording everything, but when I looked at my phone screen, I noticed something strange. The drawing was not the same as it was at first. It seems to be changing, just not in the usual way. I couldn't tell clearly, but the figure, it seemed, was moving. That night, I couldn't take my eyes off the strange drawing on the wall. Even though I know for sure that no one can change that drawing, it's still like that. Every time I look at it I feel like it's changing, moving, looking at me. My steps began to slow down. I stood there, not daring to move forward. The feeling of not being able to escape this alley arose in me. Every breath I take feels heavy, as if some invisible force is pulling me back, keeping me here. Everything around me suddenly became hazy, as if I was no longer in the real world. My steps seemed to become more and more lifeless. I walked away not feeling like I had any control over my actions. This feeling is strange. I am no longer me, but part of this darkness. And then, that whisper rang out again. This time, it came from a very close place. I turned around again, only to find myself standing alone in the dark alley again. No one, no signs. But that sound, the whispering sound, now it no longer just called my name. It was whispering something else, a word I couldn't make out, but it was as if it was talking about me, wanting me to do something. My heart was filled with confusion. I began to feel that something, some force, was pulling me into another dimension. I looked around. There was nothing but darkness and old walls. But I clearly feel that I am no longer alone. Although I tried to continue, my steps seemed to be hindered, each step becoming more and more difficult. Suddenly, I heard a noise from behind. the sound of fabric rustling as if someone was dragging a large towel across the ground. I turned around again, but there was no one. It felt like someone was chasing me and I couldn't help but panic. I turned quickly, deciding to run towards the exit. But as I ran closer to the alley door, I felt a cold sensation rising from the back of my neck, as if a cold hand had just touched my neck. I stopped, panted, turned around for one last look, but only saw a dark shadow passing across the ground, so fast that I couldn't identify it. There was no one there, but I couldn't shake that feeling away. The feeling that I can't escape, that something is waiting for me right behind me. A few days later, I no longer dared to step into that alley. I tried to find another way home, but every road made me feel insecure. That feeling didn't leave me, as if the darkness from the alley had followed me the whole time. One evening, I couldn't stand it anymore. I went back to that alley, but this time I wasn't alone. I brought a close friend, someone I trust, who will help me find out what's going on here. We both stood right at the entrance of the alley. The dim light from the street lamps was only enough to illuminate a small part of the alley. I feel very strange when someone comes with me. Part of me feels more secure, the other part makes me feel like I'm doing something very stupid. We entered the alley, and as soon as we got deeper inside, I heard a very soft noise. It sounded like rustling, something was moving behind us. I turned around, but there was no one. My friend started looking at me with suspicion, as if he felt nothing. But I feel it. Something was moving, secretly watching us. Suddenly, we stopped. A loud noise rang out from the end of the alley, the sound of something falling to the ground. My friend and I ran over, only to see a piece of broken glass lying in the middle of the ground. An eerie feeling filled me, as if someone had left a mark on purpose, a reminder that we weren't the only ones here. I looked at the broken glass, and then, something strange appeared. On the glass, I saw a reflection, not my face or my friend's, but a strange face, blurred, but clearer than ever. That face, it wasn't human, it wasn't any creature I'd ever seen. My friend also saw it. He screamed and pulled me out, but when I turned around, I couldn't take my eyes off the alley. The image of that face was still present in my mind, even after we exited the alley and stood on the main street. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat there, wondering if that face was an illusion, or if it really existed. It felt like there was a force pulling me deep into that alley that still wouldn't leave me. One night later, I decided to go back again. But this time, I went alone, because I didn't want to involve anyone. I stood in front of the alley, for the last time. But when I walked in, I didn't feel scared anymore. I no longer heard the whispers, I no longer felt the shadow following me. But I still felt a strange, terrifying silence. That night, as I stood at the entrance to the alley, I suddenly understood something. Everything I experienced, all those strange sounds and feelings of fear, was no coincidence. This alley is more than just a narrow road between two brick walls. It is a door, an entrance to another world, a place where everything is inexplicable. I turned around and walked away, but this time, I didn't look back. I remember clearly the first time I passed through that alley at night. After a long day of work, my body is tired, I just want to go home to rest. That alley looks harmless during the day, just a narrow road between brick walls, a few trash cans lying around. But at night, it has a different feeling, a feeling that I can't explain. That night, I couldn't sleep. That strange feeling still stuck with me, as if that alley was still watching me, waiting for me to return. But the scariest thing is that I can't understand why things happen the way they do. Why is it that every time I step into an alley, I feel like there's something waiting for me, an invisible but clear presence? And tonight, I couldn't resist the feeling of wanting to go back. I don't know if I was haunted or not, but I felt a strong pull from that alley, as if it was calling me into the darkness. The night was dark and quiet. I stood in front of the alley again. There was no sound, only the sound of the wind gently blowing through the trees, the rustling of dry leaves underfoot. The light from the street lamps shines faintly down the alley, but it further enhances the mysterious and confusing atmosphere here. Walking in, I began to feel my breathing become more rapid, as if the air in this alley was more stuffy than usual. The brick walls were tall and thick, casting long shadows on the ground, but it felt like they were oppressing me, as if they were trying to push me into a space from which I could not escape. I walked step by step, each step seemed to increase the feeling of suffocation. And then, suddenly, I heard a very slight noise, a rustling sound, very faint, but so clear that I couldn't miss it. The sound came from nowhere but behind me, and when I turned around, there was nothing. I stood motionless, holding the phone in my hand, the light of the flashlight shining through the walls. As I looked at the brick walls, something moved quickly to my right, in the darkness. I turned around immediately, but saw nothing. I felt more and more fear rising inside me. My mind began to spin, chaotic thoughts rushed back, inexplicable. I could feel the presence of something close, very close, but I couldn't see it. It must be the wind, I said to myself, or maybe it's some cat. But no matter how hard I tried to convince myself, that feeling of insecurity still wouldn't leave me. The next day, I walked back to the alley during the day. Everything is normal, nothing strange. Maybe it's just my imagination due to fatigue, I think. But then, when I walked through the alley the next night, everything changed. Suddenly, the whisper rang out again. But this time it wasn't a soft sound, but a clear voice, with a deep timbre, as if there was someone standing right behind me. I turned around, but saw only darkness. The whispering no longer stopped at my name, but was an incomprehensible sentence. A strange language, like words from another world. My legs started shaking, my heartbeat was so strong that I could hear it pounding in my ears. I didn't dare turn around again, because it felt like someone was standing right behind me, watching my every step. I walked faster, but that feeling didn't go away. My footsteps echoed in this dark space, and I couldn't understand why this sound was there. Am I not the only one in this alley? As I neared the end of the alley, I heard rustling again. This time it was clearer, as if something was dragging on the ground. I looked around, but still nothing. The cold wind blew past, but I felt something cool, not from the wind, but from the darkness that was covering me. The feeling of fear became even clearer the next night, when I entered that alley again. This time, when I turned around, I saw a vague shape, like a shadow moving from corner to corner, but when I shined my flashlight, there was nothing. The light from the flashlight began to fade, and I felt an inexplicable suffocation. I continued walking forward, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. At this moment, I didn't just hear a whisper calling my name anymore. Now, I hear footsteps, very light footsteps, almost inaudible, but clear in this quiet space. Suddenly, I felt a change. The air around me became strangely still, as if all sound had disappeared. The rustling sounds, the footsteps, all disappeared, leaving only a terrifying silence. I stopped, not daring to breathe loudly, because I felt like something was watching me from behind. And then, I heard a new sound. A soft laugh, very light, but powerful enough to make me shiver. That laugh was unlike any human laugh. It had an eerie sound, as if it were the laughter of something other than human. I turned around immediately, the flashlight light illuminating everything, but still saw nothing. The brick wall in front of me remained cold and emotionless. However, the feeling of fear inside me increased more and more. I didn't know if I was hallucinating or what, but every time I turned around, I felt a presence so close that I could feel its breath on my neck. The feeling of fear completely took over me. I can't stand anymore. My legs felt like they had no strength left, and I felt like I was falling into darkness. I ran, not daring to look back, not daring to hear any more sounds. When I escaped the alley and ran out of there, I felt a strange sense of relief, but also anxiety. Can I really get out of that alley? Or is everything just starting? In the days that followed, I tried to avoid the alley. I no longer dare to turn back, even though I know that its darkness still follows me, still watching me from behind. Some nights I wake up, drenched in sweat, and feel like something is standing right next to my bed. An inexplicable feeling, as if it was waiting for me to return, waiting for me to enter that alley again. But I don't dare. Because I know, if I go back, I may never return. And the secrets of the alley will forever be beyond human understanding. Even though I avoided that alley for a few days, the strange feeling didn't leave me. On quiet nights, I can't escape thinking about it. It feels like that alley has become a part of me, a shadow that never leaves, lurking in the dark corners of my mind. One night, while I was sleeping, I heard a knock on the door. It was a gentle knock, but enough to wake me up. My heart pounded. I jumped up and looked around. Nobody. There was no sound other than the sound of my own breathing. But I couldn't shake the feeling like something was standing outside the door. The feeling of being observed, watched, makes me feel uneasy. I opened the door, but when I opened it, there was only darkness. I turned around, my mind kept racing. I walked into the living room and sat down, holding the phone with trembling hands. I don't know if I'm hallucinating or not, but I feel one thing clearly: what I experienced with that alley was not a joke, not a coincidence. There was something very real, very scary, and it was following me, waiting for me somewhere in the dark. The next morning, I decided to go back to that alley, even though I knew that it might be a wrong decision. But I can't stop. I needed to know the truth. I needed to face this fear. As I stood in front of the alley, I felt like a nightmare was coming true. Everything was silent, only the wind blew gently through the trees, but the air seemed stagnant. I walked in, the light from my phone's flashlight shone on the ground, reflecting the cold brick walls. Suddenly, I realized that the wall in front of me was no longer the same. On it, stains and peeling paint have formed a strange shape, like a face, but not the face of a normal person. Its eyes stared at me, and its mouth seemed to be smiling sinisterly. My eyes opened wide. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I reached out my hand to touch the wall, and immediately, I felt a cold breath rushing straight into my hand. It wasn't the coldness of the wind, but something deeper, like the breath of some creature other than human. I withdrew my hand, but couldn't take my eyes off the wall. I knew there was something lurking in there. When I looked closer, I heard a strange sound, a sound I had never heard before. It was not the sound of wind, nor was it the sound of a falling object. It was a very soft whisper, but clear. "Don't come back." That voice was very deep and melancholy, unlike any human voice. I stood there, unable to move, unable to do anything but listen. My heart was pounding in my chest. I tried to regain my composure, but it felt like someone was standing right behind me, making me unable to stop. That sound still rang out, and this time, I knew it was coming from behind. I turned around quickly, the flashlight beam shining through old trash cans, paper boxes, and broken glass scattered on the ground. But nothing. There was no one standing there. There is only darkness. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It felt like something was looking at me from the darkness. Too scared to continue walking, I turned around and ran as fast as I could out the alley. At this point, I no longer paid attention to my steps. I couldn't stop panting, sweat drenched my forehead. As I walked out of the alley, I saw the bright streetlights, and a feeling of safety dawned on me. But I know that fear is still somewhere, lurking in the darkness. Even though I escaped the alley, that presence did not disappear. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I feel like someone is standing next to my bed. I tried to open my eyes, but I couldn't see anything, only cold air surrounded me, as if an invisible force was holding me down. Can I escape that alley? Or will it continue to follow me, always present in the darkness, waiting for my return? This question haunted me for many nights. Although I couldn't explain what happened, I clearly felt that that alley was no ordinary place. It is a door, an entrance to a world we cannot fully understand. One more night, I decided to go back. Not because I'm not afraid, but because I feel like I have to face this fear. I can't let it rule me forever. As I stood at the entrance to the alley, I heard no whispers, felt no presence from the darkness. But I know that something is still there. I walked in, and this time I felt a change. This alley is no longer the same as before. It is no longer dark, no longer gloomy. The light from my flashlight shined unexpectedly, and everything around me seemed clearer than ever. I walked away, but the feeling of fear came back. Can I escape this alley again, or will I become part of it, part of the darkness that awaits the next? Even though I faced my fear in the alley, the feeling that I hadn't truly escaped continued to haunt me. The following days, I tried to live as usual, but every night, every time the darkness enveloped the room, I felt something unusual was lurking around. One night, while I was sitting in bed, suddenly the light in the room flickered. My mind was spinning. I raised my eyes and saw that the darkness in the corner of the room seemed thicker, as if the darkness was moving, overwhelming the space around me. I stood up, my legs lost all strength, and just as I reached the door, I heard that whisper, this time, not from the alley, but from inside my room. I turned around, my eyes opened wide, but there was still darkness, nothing. This strange feeling like I lost a part of myself in that alley, and now it has followed me back. The next day, I decided to learn more about that alley. Maybe I was caught in a never-ending spiral, but I should have known better. I went to the local library, looking for old documents and stories about the history of this neighborhood. Not long after, I found some suspicious information. The alley, according to some old documents, was the site of a series of strange events many years ago. It is rumored that in the 1960s, there was a mysterious disappearance involving a family living nearby. The case has never been solved, and that alley, according to longtime residents, is believed to be connected to unexplained forces. People living in the area once said that, at night, there were strange sounds coming from the alley, incomprehensible whispers, as if someone was calling the names of the deceased. But the strangest thing was, everyone who entered the alley at night felt a presence. A feeling of being watched, like someone was standing right behind them. After learning about the alley's past, I felt more nervous than ever. Maybe everything I experienced was not a coincidence. The sounds, the figures, and the strange feelings, maybe they all have a deeper reason. People who had previously entered that alley had left their own traces. And now, I'm next. One evening, I decided to go back to the alley, but this time I was mentally prepared for anything. I can't keep living in this fear forever. I brought a camera with me, hoping to record what was happening so I could prove I wasn't crazy, or maybe find a reasonable reason for what happened. As I stood at the entrance to the alley, I felt something in the air, a strange tension. But I can't go back, because I know that if I go back this time, I might not be able to get out again. I entered the alley, but this time I didn't hear my footsteps echoing on the ground. Everything was silent, too silent. I shined the flashlight around, but nothing strange happened. There was only darkness, brick walls, and a silence I couldn't explain. Suddenly, a sound rang out. This time it wasn't a whisper, but a very loud noise, as if something had just fallen to the ground. I turned around, but saw nothing but piles of scattered trash and a few pieces of broken brick. The feeling of difficulty breathing came back. I wanted to run, but my legs were frozen and I couldn't move. When I looked at the opposite wall, I realized that there was no longer the strange face I saw before. Instead, there was a new shape, a blurry, unclear image, but one that made me feel nauseous. And then I realized something scary. The image looked like a smiling face, but it wasn't a human smile. It was a sinister smile, full of malice, like a warning, a sign of the end. I can't stand anymore. A feeling of fear overwhelmed me. I turned and ran out of the alley. But this time, I felt it clearly, something was chasing me. It's faster than me, and I can't escape it. When I rushed out of the alley and looked back, the dim light at the end of the alley seemed to be extinguished. I gasped and ran home, my heart still pounding in my chest. But the strangest thing was when I opened the video I recorded. I only heard my own breathing, hurried footsteps on the road, and the wind whistling in my ears, but there were no strange sounds. There were no whispers, no mysterious voices. Everything I had heard before seemed to never exist. I can't explain what's going on. Is that alley really haunted? Or is my mind just playing with itself? But one thing I'm sure of, it's not just an alley. It is part of a mystery that I cannot understand. And no matter how hard I tried, I knew I couldn't escape it. I need to leave here for a while. I want to find a quiet place to organize my thoughts. Maybe going to the countryside would be better. I suddenly remembered the invitation from Tom, an old friend who lives on a farm upstate. Perhaps this is an opportunity for me to temporarily forget the strange things that have haunted me all this time. So the next morning, I packed my luggage and took the earliest bus out of the city. It took more than 3 hours to travel, and I finally arrived at Tom's farm. The atmosphere here is completely different from the city, much fresher and more peaceful. Tom welcomed me with a friendly smile and led me to tour the large land he was managing. Everything seemed normal, but there was one thing that caught my attention from the moment I arrived. An old barn is located separately in the corner of the farm. Its walls are covered with moss, and the wooden door is warped as if it had been forgotten by time. From a distance, it doesn't look like anything special, but there was something about that place that I couldn't take my eyes off of. At first, I tried to ignore that strange feeling. But as the afternoon faded and Tom busied himself with work, I began to feel an inexplicable urge. I need to get close to it. I don't know why, it's just that an invisible gravity is pulling me closer. And so I started walking towards the old warehouse. When I walked through the door, cold and damp air immediately enveloped me. The unpleasant smells of rotting wood and damp earth wafted through the air. Inside the warehouse is a dark and cramped space. Old wooden crates were piled up in one corner, and discarded objects such as broken tables and chairs or pieces of wooden boards were scattered everywhere. The strange thing was, even though this place seemed unused for a long time, I felt a strong presence, as if someone had been here and still lingered. I walked deeper inside, each step echoing in the quiet space. I raised my hand to wipe a thick layer of dust from the old wooden table. A slight noise came out, as if someone was moving behind me. I turned around, but there was nothing. There was only dark space, a room full of dark shadows. Suddenly, something caught my eye. In a hidden corner, under a thick layer of dust, I noticed a dry wooden board that had been pushed askew. I walked closer and couldn't hold back my curiosity. When I lifted the wooden board, a rush of cold air rushed out, and I almost dropped the wooden board to the ground. Behind it is a narrow passage, it is impossible to see clearly inside, only a light breeze passes by. In that moment, I felt an indescribable feeling, as if there was an invitation, a calling from deep within that darkness. That feeling was similar to the urge I experienced when facing the alley before. But this time, I couldn't leave without knowing what was hiding behind that door. I pulled the wooden board aside, creating enough space for me to squeeze through. The light from the flashlight in my hand flashed in the dark space ahead. I walked in, filled with anxiety but unable to resist the urge. Every step I took echoed in the quiet space, and I couldn't help but feel that something wasn't right. After a while, I went deeper inside and started to feel like there was a cold air surrounding me. Suddenly, the light from my flashlight illuminated a strange wall, a wall not unlike the walls of the barn. It was built of hard stones, seemingly newer than the surrounding walls. And the strangest thing was, on the wall there was a drawing, not an ordinary drawing, but an ancient character that I couldn't recognize. The light from the flashlight didn't seem to be able to illuminate the entire drawing, but I sensed that there was something in the drawing that was trying to attract my attention. It feels like there's a reminder, some kind of warning that I've gone too far. My eyes were still glued to that wall, but I couldn't understand the meaning of the drawing. A cold feeling rose inside me, and I knew I had entered something from which I could not return. The urge, the presence of something invisible, arose again. I felt like someone was watching me from the shadows behind. Just as I was about to step out, I heard a noise behind me, as soft as a breath. I turned around, and suddenly, an image flashed through the darkness, a figure, or perhaps just an illusion. My heart pounded, and I knew I couldn't leave without solving this mystery. My eyes were still glued to the wall, but I couldn't understand the meaning of the intricate drawings on it. They weren't just scribbles, but seemed to hold some kind of story, a secret that had been buried for a long time. A cold chill ran down my spine. I felt like I had stepped into something that I couldn't turn back from. The urge, the strange feeling that I couldn't leave this place, still stuck, and now it was stronger than ever. Just as I was about to step out of the old room, a soft sound rang out behind me. Light as a breath. I turned around. Darkness swallowed the room, but something flickered out of the corner of my eye, a shadow, or just my hallucination. My heart was pounding, sweat was pouring down my forehead. I knew I couldn't leave without decoding the secrets hidden in this room. I had no choice but to continue. The atmosphere in the room changed. There was no longer the scary silence like before, but an invisible presence, as if something was patiently waiting for me. I didn't dare move. The space seemed to shrink around me, every breath became heavy and difficult. Then it appeared again. A shadow, looming in the darkness. This time, I knew I wasn't imagining it. There's someone here. I tightened my grip on the baseball bat, the only tool I could use to defend myself. The room became more and more stuffy, as if I was surrounded by something invisible but dangerous. The flashlight in my hand shook slightly, the weak light was only enough to illuminate a small part of the room. When I turned the light toward the corner of the wall, an old wooden panel shook slightly. I swallowed hard, cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. Behind that wooden panel, what is there? I was silent for a moment, then took a deep breath. I know that there is only one way to know the truth. I raised my hand and slowly approached the wood that was gently vibrating. My footsteps echoed on the damp ground, and I stopped in front of the stone wall I had seen before. Every detail of the painting on the wall made me feel the tension weighing more heavily on my mind. The drawings were strange characters, so old that I couldn't recognize them, but I felt like they were conveying a message. A message from another world, a warning. I bent down, trying to get a closer look at the characters, and when the light shone in, I saw that they were not just simple drawings but a symbol, as if some kind of ancient text. Suddenly, I felt a cold wind rush past, and those characters seemed to start flashing in the dim light. It feels like they are changing every second, fluctuating and moving through the air. Suddenly, a sound rang out, so soft it was almost inaudible, but very clear in the silence of the room, a quiet, dark laugh, as if someone was standing right behind me. My heart pounding, I turned around, but there was nothing but darkness. However, the feeling that something was standing behind me couldn't be denied. That presence, invisible but clear in every wave of air. I can't stand any longer. Everything around me felt like it was shrinking, I felt like I was stuck in a trap. The letters on the wall, the strange drawings, and the undeniable feeling of being watched all create an inescapable vortex. So, I decided to move forward. Feeling unable to bear it anymore, I decided to explore further. I continued to walk towards the wall, the light from the flashlight became weak, not enough to illuminate the surrounding space. The drawings seemed to absorb all the light, as if they were swallowing everything. My hand touched the wall, and immediately, a slight vibration spread from the wall, causing me to retract my hand. There was a movement from within, as if this wall was not an ordinary wall. It feels like there's a secret mechanism at work, something that's been hidden for a long time. The feeling of confusion grew stronger, and I began to realize that I was dealing with more than just a simple supernatural phenomenon. There is something that has existed for a long time in this space, something that humans cannot understand. I turned around, but felt like someone had followed me inside, an invisible presence. I took a step back, but the walls suddenly shook. The sound rang out from inside. Not loud, not rushed, just a soft sigh, as if someone was signaling me not to leave. My heart was pounding, my feet felt like they were glued to the ground. The darkness around me grew thicker, and as I swung my flashlight forward, the light began to fade strangely. A dark shadow flashed behind me. I turned around, nothing but darkness. But I know for sure, that presence is still here. And it won't let me leave, until I understand this secret. I tightened my grip on the flashlight, took a deep breath, and continued. Even though I'm scared, I can't leave right now. The sky outside gradually turned dark, the night like a black cloth covering everything around. The cold wind swept past, making me shiver. But it wasn't just the cold, the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. Every step I took, I felt like there was a pair of eyes lurking in the darkness, quietly watching my every move. Suddenly, I discovered small fingerprints on the metal surface of the warehouse door. I was speechless. These marks, they couldn't have appeared by chance. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. I can't go back now. The warehouse window still stood there, dim light radiating from inside in an inexplicable way. It was neither completely bright nor completely dark, but as if some invisible entity was occupying that space. I approached the window, carefully lowering my body to avoid making any noise. Inside, everything was engulfed in a mist, as if there was a curtain between me and the truth hidden inside. I squinted my eyes, trying to see through the fog. And then, a strange shape appeared. It wasn't clear, it wasn't sharp, but I knew for sure that something, or someone, was inside, waiting for me. The surrounding night became terrifyingly quiet. I clenched my hands, a feeling of insecurity rising in my heart. Unable to bear the mystery, I decided to return to the main door of the warehouse. I walked around again, listening to every noise around. The breeze still blew, but this time it wasn't the rustling sound of debris on the ground. It's a small sound, the sound of footsteps. This sound is not mine. My heart was pounding, and I turned around, quickly holding the flashlight and shining it towards the noise. I saw a figure, looming in the darkness. It was a tall figure, but I couldn't see his face clearly. It felt like someone was following me, always just a few steps away, but never present enough for me to confirm. My eyes still didn't leave the darkness, but there was no obvious sign of that person. That ambiguity made me even more scared. My footsteps were now inaudible, but I still felt a presence, something invisible that I couldn't see, but I knew it was there. I stepped back, trying to find a way to escape the tension pent up in my body. My lips were dry, my hands shaking as I continued to turn forward. That feeling, the feeling inside me, is indescribable. I asked myself, am I hallucinating? Am I imagining something that isn't real? I returned to the main house, but even though I stood in the middle of the warm kitchen with pale yellow light, I still couldn't dispel the strange feeling that surrounded me. Tom was still there, as if he had never left. Everything around seemed so normal. But inside me, all my thoughts returned to the old warehouse, where there were still strange fingerprints, streaks of burnt ash, and an invisible presence that made me uneasy. Tom had said that no one used the warehouse, that it had been abandoned for a long time. But I know that's not true. Something happened there. A buried mystery. An untold story. I could go back to the main house, I could pretend it was all just my imagination, but deep inside, I knew. I can't leave without finding out the truth. The feeling of suffocation increased, to the point I couldn't stand it anymore. I rushed out of the mansion. Every step on the gravel road sounded like a reminder of what I had just experienced. Darkness surrounded me, not just the darkness of nature, but the invisible darkness of a presence I couldn't explain. I didn't turn around, but I felt it. Something is watching me. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. But then, rattling. A sound rang out from above. From the attic. I froze. What I heard inside the house, echoing footsteps, strange sounds in the quiet void, couldn't have been just my imagination. I don't wait another second. I rushed out and ran straight to my car. But as soon as I touched the car door, a chill ran down my spine. Footsteps. They are small, light, but clear. And they still follow me. The mark cannot be erased. When I left the villa, that strange feeling still couldn't let me go. I was in a hurry to leave, but as soon as I sat in the car, I knew I couldn't escape that darkness. The strange fingerprints on the car, the inexplicable streaks of dust on the windows, it all haunted me. I turned to look in the rearview mirror, but there was nothing but a dark void behind me. I couldn't understand my confusion. It seemed like there was some force pushing me forward, something inexplicable, but so clear in my feelings. The small handprints on the car, they were so small, not like those of an adult, but clearly present, undeniable. When I got home, I couldn't believe that everything could end here. I went inside the house, checking every window and door, confirming that everything was safe, but in my heart, I knew one thing: I couldn't escape this feeling. I couldn't ignore those fingerprints, I couldn't stop as the feeling of being watched always haunted me. That night, I couldn't sleep. My eyes only opened the next morning when light entered the room. Everything seemed normal, but I knew that those marks were not a coincidence. I decided to go back to the mansion the next morning, hoping to find out why those fingerprints appeared, why they were always there, around the house and my car. When I arrived, I saw the house standing silently in the daylight, no longer as strange as before. However, one thing hasn't changed: I still feel like something is watching me, an invisible force still hovering around me. I continued to examine the tracks, looking for any clues that might help me understand better. I walked around the house, checking for marks on the windows and car body, and then I noticed something strange. The small fingerprints on the glass are no longer what they used to be. They had faded, but their outlines could still be clearly seen. It seemed like someone had carefully cleaned them, but not enough to erase all traces. I continued walking around the house, and when I looked up, I noticed there was a small window upstairs, obscured in darkness. A feeling of insecurity rose within me. I heard a light scratching sound again, like something was moving inside the house, above the attic. I turned around and suddenly saw a faint figure, seemingly watching me from that window. My tension reached its peak when I realized something horrifying. I can't escape this house. It's not just a place, it's a trap. An invisible trap that I cannot explain. Tiny handprints, passing silhouettes, the feeling of being watched growing clearer every time I tried to leave. I don't know what to do. Call the police? What can I say? That I'm haunted by something that can't be seen? No, they won't believe me. But I know I can't stay here any longer. That feeling, the feeling that cannot be turned off, is like an invisible entity pushing me down a path with no way out. And then I understood something. I have to go. But can I really leave, or will this house keep me forever? I tried to leave. I really tried. But every night, those sounds still ring out. The sound of footsteps in the hallway. The creaking sound of the floor. Wordless whispers. They haunt me, making it impossible for me to sleep peacefully. I wonder, is it all just the hallucination of someone slowly becoming crazy? Or is there really something that exists in the darkness? Day after day, I felt like I was losing control. Small handprints. Old notes. The mirror falls for no reason. It's not the things in this house that are scaring me, but the feeling that I no longer have a safe place to stay. This morning, I woke up and discovered that the bathroom mirror was cracked. The cracks ran long like an invisible hand trying to reach out from the inside. I stepped back, feeling the whole room shrinking. I remember the wall behind the sink, where I found strange things I had never noticed before. And then, a horrifying thought flashed through my mind. Maybe I'm not just being followed, but also stuck in a place where someone else has never left. Remaining traces. That evening, when I returned to the bathroom, I not only felt the cold from the dripping shower head, but also felt like someone was standing right behind me. My reflection in the mirror looked tired and exhausted. I saw dark circles under my eyes, a haggard expression, and traces of mental fatigue. Everything around me seemed to become gloomy, as if there was an invisible slowness that lasted every moment. I decided to check everything again, as a habit, a way to find the solution to everything. I opened the window in the bathroom, trying to breathe in fresh air, but still couldn't get rid of the feeling of shortness of breath. Every time I look in the mirror, I feel like someone is looking back at me from inside. The next day, I tried to escape this stress by going out and finding a quiet place to relax. But as soon as I turned around, I felt that the house was not just a shelter but a strange space, a place that I could not explain, where the appearance of small handprints, unexplained noises, and scratches in the mirror still lingered around me. Even though I checked every corner of the house, and tried to make sense of the strange happenings, I knew one thing for sure: something was lurking in this house, something was waiting for me. That feeling is not an illusion, but an undeniable truth. When I looked at the wall where I had found the blade and the note, I couldn't help but feel that it was a reminder, a message from the past, from those who had lived here before me, from things I could not understand. There was definitely something strange going on, and I couldn't continue to live in the shadow of this suspicion. I couldn't stand the feeling anymore that someone was looking at me, following my every step, from the creaking sounds of the floor, to the handprints on the mirror, to forgotten notes. Part of me didn't want to face the truth, but the other part couldn't stop once I saw those traces. I decided to once again face this house. I cannot continue to live in this fear, in this inexplicability. I went down to the bathroom, this time not to wash my face or brush my teeth, but to search for answers. I looked in the mirror, feeling like something was looking back at me from there. And then, I saw it. A new mark, smaller but clear, on the mirror. It's definitely a fingerprint, but this time it's not mine. I walked closer, my hands shaking, and I realized there was no way to explain what was going on in this house. I don't know if I can get out, but I know one thing for sure: this house does not allow me peace. That feeling, that someone, or something, was watching me from those shadows, would never let me go. And I know that, no matter how hard I try, I will never truly get out of this house. I returned to my seat, my mind unable to calm down. The manager's words kept echoing in my head. I've seen a lot of things during my time here. I'm used to it. Those words were like a reminder, as if he knew something I couldn't understand. The feeling of tension inside me was increasing. The glasses sliding on the table, the tilted paintings on the wall, all have something strange and difficult to explain. Everything in this restaurant seemed to carry an invisible energy, surrounding me, forcing me to acknowledge the truth, even though I was not willing to face it. I took a sip of cold coffee, but it did nothing to dispel the heavy feeling in my stomach. Looking around, I couldn't deny that something was wrong. I felt trapped in a space I couldn't escape, where everything could change without a reasonable explanation. Even the staff in the restaurant seemed strange, as if they were too familiar with these strange phenomena and did not want to talk about it or explain it. I know I can't keep running away. Fear did not disappear, it clung to me, crept into every breath, every beat of my heart. I've lived for too long in the darkness of the inexplicable, and this time, I have to face it. I went down to the bathroom, not to wash my face or brush my teeth like usual, but to look for answers. I looked into the mirror. And then, I saw it. A new fingerprint. Smaller, fainter, but unmistakable. It's not mine. I walked forward, breathing heavily. My hand trembled as I raised it to the mirror, but when I touched it, nothing. No trace, no vapor, no explanation whatsoever. But I know it's there. I have seen it. Once again, I understand that this house does not want me to be in peace. There was someone, or something, watching me. And no matter how hard I try, I will never truly escape this place. I sat down on the chair, clutching the cold cup of coffee. My mind cannot calm down. The hotel manager's words kept echoing in my head. I've seen a lot of things during my time here. I'm used to it. What did he see? That sentence was like a knife cutting into my mind. Not because of its content, but the way he said it, as if he had accepted something that I still couldn't understand. I looked around the restaurant. Something is very wrong. The glasses slide on the table by themselves. The paintings tilted on the wall, but no one touched them. The employees looked strange, as if they were familiar with these things, but they didn't want to say so. The whole space carries an invisible flow of energy. Something unconsciously weighs on me, forcing me to realize the truth. Even though I'm not ready to face it. The signs are undeniable. As I stood up and walked closer to the manager, I couldn't help but feel the strangeness of the way he avoided eye contact with me. He tried to stay calm, but it was clear to me that he was trying to hide something. The feeling became even clearer when I heard the creaking of the floorboards under my feet, as if an invisible force was moving around me. I can't ignore it anymore. Tilted photos on the wall, strange noises, and the feeling that something was watching me from all over the bar. Even though I tried to explain them away as natural phenomena, something deep inside me told me that they weren't. Discover what is hidden. My heart pounded as I walked out of the coffee shop, but the feeling of insecurity still clung to me. Something is watching me. Even though there was no one on the quiet street, I still felt that invisible gaze, a presence that I couldn't see but couldn't deny. The images from inside the shop are still stuck in my head. Tilted paintings that no one touches. The glasses slid on their own, as if an invisible hand gently pushed them. And the strange looks in the staff's eyes, as if they knew something but chose to keep quiet. I couldn't ignore all those signs. I had to dig deeper. Even though I didn't want to admit it, I knew that my house had a secret, and if I didn't face it, I would never have peace. I can't stop anymore. There's something about this house that's not right. Small handprints on the wall. Mysterious notes are hidden in the wall. And now, a hidden room right above my bedroom. I stood in the middle of the room, looking up at the ceiling. Why have I never noticed? A slight asymmetry, an imperfect border, as if this ceiling had been altered before. I gripped the crowbar tightly and took a deep breath. Sprinkle. The ceiling panel popped open, dust fell, and a black hole appeared before my eyes. A closed room, a hidden space that no one would expect. I crawled inside, my hands shaking with the flashlight. Inside, the air was musty and heavy, as if someone had once lived here, but had left not too long ago. And then, I saw it. A chair. It wasn't as dusty as I thought it would be. Someone has been sitting here, recently. Old footprints on wooden floor. A small table, with a few items left behind. A dirty cloth was balled up in the corner of the room, as if someone had slept here. I swallowed hard, feeling a cold breeze run down my spine. Someone was here. Maybe they're still here. I turned the flashlight, my heart pounding, my eyes glued to the darkness before me. And at that moment, I heard a noise. A whisper. Right behind me. Ghosts in the quiet space. Unable to stop, I decided to continue researching, no matter how much fear was rising in my heart. I moved through the hidden room, flashlight in hand, shining light through the dusty walls. The feeling of shortness of breath made me stop a few times, but I continued to move forward, wanting to clarify everything, wanting to understand what this room meant. As I approached the desk, I noticed a drawer open. In it were some dried-up pens, an empty ink bottle, and some blank pieces of paper. My hands trembled as I touched them, feeling like I was trespassing on some secret, something I shouldn't know. I felt a cold wave run through my body as I noticed distinct marks on the surfaces in the room. It appears that someone intentionally left these items behind, or that they were recently used. I continued to move through the space, looking around for more signs of some presence. My footsteps were clearly visible in the dust, and I saw a few other footprints, possibly those of someone wearing smaller shoes. A strange feeling came over me as I realized that maybe someone continued to use this space, as if they didn't want to leave. This hidden room is not only a physical space but also a testament to the past. From dust traces to worn furniture, every detail seems telling a separate story. But what is that story? Why is there such a hidden room in the house? And who left these traces? The more I researched, the more I felt like I was falling deeper into a maze with no way out. Whether I like it or not, I know that I can't stop. I feel that this space is hiding a big secret, and I cannot retreat until I discover everything. Finally, I went back to the bedroom and looked at the ceiling again. The small hole I made was still large enough for me to see inside. Everything was silent, but I felt a change. The smell of old wood and damp air makes me uncomfortable. It feels like there's something waiting for me. I know I can't retreat anymore. I took a deep breath, lifted the flashlight and shined it into the dark space above. The darkness was so thick it seemed to swallow every faint ray of light. I have no choice but to move forward. And then, I climbed up. I stood in that room, feeling like I was lost in another world. The dim light from the flashlight illuminated dusty chairs, an old coffee table, and traces of a past I couldn't explain. The feeling of a presence still surrounded me, as if this room was telling me something I couldn't understand. I can't go back. No matter how scared I am, no matter how worried I am, I still feel like I have to keep looking for answers. But the closer I got, the more strange I felt. The items in the room appeared to have been used recently, although there were no signs of anyone actually living in the room. The small footprints on the floor, the sheets covered in dust but not long enough to become completely forgotten, all told a story I couldn't explain. I moved towards the corner of the room, where there was a desk with a single drawer. When I opened the drawer, I found nothing but a few dry ink pens, an empty ink bottle, and some blank pieces of paper. But what surprised me most were the marks around the drawer, scratches that seemed to be newly made, as if someone had searched in this drawer not long ago. I can't stand this feeling anymore. This space, this room, is drawing me into a secret that I cannot escape. Every step I take, every trace I find, makes me feel like I'm falling deeper into something I can't control. I took a deep breath, decided to turn around and leave the room. But when I turned my back, I heard a noise, like something breaking, a slight scratching sound. I stopped, feeling a surge of fear in my chest. The space became silent, too silent. Part of me wanted to run away, but I couldn't. I felt like someone was standing right behind me, just waiting for me to turn around. And when I turned around, I saw that the bench, which I had seen just a few minutes before, was now moving. Not much, just a little, as if an invisible force was pushing it. I can't explain it. I looked around, wanting to find a reason for what happened, but there was nothing. There's no one left there. I stood still, feeling fear mixed with curiosity, but there was no explanation for what I was witnessing. Finally, I turned around and walked out of that hidden room, feeling like I had retreated from a world where I did not belong. I returned to my bedroom, unable to stop looking at the ceiling where I had discovered the hidden room. But I know, no matter what, I will never be able to forget that room, the old things, the strange traces I found, and the feeling that something was waiting for me there. But one thing I know for sure, I opened a door that I cannot close. And with it, a world of obsession and mystery that I cannot escape. The feeling of something still hidden within those old walls will never leave me. Thank you for following the story until the end. Hopefully this story has brought you moments of suspense, curiosity, and even a little chill. If you like this content, Don't forget to like to support me, share the story for your friends to experience, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next mysterious ghost stories. Thank you, and see you again in the next scary late nights.